Good afternoon. Welcome back to Passion World Talk Radio Network. PWTRN is a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And on today, lest we forget historical, with your host Lillian Cauldwell, we are going to find out economics 101. What is a tariff? Tariff. And we're going to learn how they work in economics. And I'll give you some examples. And this is written by masterclass.com. So go look it up. So what do you want to know? There's almost nothing more contentious than to hear potential candidate Donald Trump talk about raising tariffs on goods that we import, which means bring in to the country as compared to export going out. They've been around for as long as people have been trading goods across sea and states. To this day, economics debate their exact effect on economic growth. So what are they and how do they work? So you can understand what's going on. First thing, so what is a tariff? It is a tax imposed by one country on goods and services imported from another country. They may result in increased prices for domestic consumers, which in turn may make imported goods less appealing relative to domestically produced goods. Historically, governments have relied on tariffs to protect or to promote domestic industries from foreign competition while also raising government revenue. Of course, that's at our expense. So what kind of tariffs are there? They're set by the government and collected by the Customs Authority. In the United States, they're collected by Customs and Border Patrol on behalf of the Department of Commerce. There are two major types of tariffs: specific tariffs and valorem tax tariffs. That's V, or the whole word is ad, A-D, valorem, V-A-L-O-R-E-M. Let's start with specific tariffs. Specifically, a fixed fee on a particular type of good. For example, the U.S. imposes a 51% tariff on imported wristwatches, excepting those countries with which the U.S. has a free trade agreement with. And this tariff applies regardless of the cost of the watch. The ad valorem tariffs are based on the worth of the item. For example, the U.S. imposes a 2.5% tariff on automobiles imported from the European Union, while the European Union imposes a 10% tariff on automobiles imported from the U.S. Now, the Trump administration has threatened to raise the U.S. tariff to 25%, and the EU has promised to reciprocate. Seems like that sandbox is already getting crowded. What is the purpose of tariffs? Well, governments have used it throughout history for various reasons. Historically, they've helped governments protect domestic industries from foreign competition while also raising revenue. Today, tariffs are also the most basic tool countries use in a trade war. Remember that trade war with China that's still going on? Yes, okay. If the countries involved are large enough, they may use tariffs as a way to exert significant pressure on one another in order to exact concessions on trade or other areas. The idea is that by making foreign products more expensive, governments can encourage their citizens to buy from domestic producers instead, producers that might not be able to compete otherwise, In theory, it's a way for governments to boost the domestic economy while reducing their trade deficit. And let's admit it, we have a very large trade deficit. Regulatory growth. But before we get into that, you ought to know in practice, it's a lot more complicated. Increasing prices Remember, a tariff is a tax. That's what got our country started in the Revolutionary War, when Britain levied unfair taxes on tea on the colonial government to pay for their war with Napoleon. See, one action always is relative to another action, in case you wondered. Can lead to a reduction in GDP in the short term as goods and services become more expensive for consumers. In the long run, protected industries may also become less efficient or innovative due to a loss of competition. Now, retaliatory tariffs can also cause major damage to industries that rely on exports or industries that have complex supply chains dependent on international trade, like those batteries for tablets and cell phones, the one we keep on running out of here in the States, so we have to go abroad to get them. And also for the cars, who also have to have AI. Why, I'm not exactly sure, but whatever. Believers in more liberalized or free trade are generally opposed to tariffs on the belief that lower barriers to trade benefit allow international commerce to flow unimpeded. So when did they originate? They would say roughly by the end of the Renaissance until the 19th century, most Western nations relied on a system of high protective tariffs to protect or promote domestic industries. The era of mercantilism, as it's come to be called, emphasized promoting domestic industries and exporting as many manufactured goods as possible while importing only raw materials, preferably from colonial possessions. That's why Britain, to name one, went after all those different countries. Think about it. Beginning in the late 18th century, however, classical economics, influenced by the work of Adam Smith, began to advocate for free trade, or laissez-faire economics, as an alternative to mercantilism, though different states, especially Germany and the US, continued to pursue mercantilist policies into the early 20th century. Tariffs have played an important role in the history of the US. Alexander Hamilton, the first US Treasury Secretary, advocated for a protectionist system of high tariffs to incubate American industry until they achieved the economics of scale required to compete with international rivals. It was also the major source of revenue for the federal government. Income tax. Tariff revenues made up the vast majority of the federal budget. Well, now you know why Trump's doing it. So what changed? After World War II, the victorious Allied powers developed a system of multinational institutions to promote international cooperation and create greater economic ties between nations, in the hope that greater economic integration would make large-scale military conflict less likely. Well, we can throw that one out. Some of these institutions included the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the forerunners to the European Union, as well as the World Trade Organization. Thus, liberalized trade became a cornerstone of what's called the post-war international order. Today, the WTO is the main international body that handles trade between nations. Its objective is to reduce tariffs and promote free trade agreements worldwide. So how are tariffs decided? They're not just a matter of economic policy. They're also a political tool or a weapon. Yes, Mr. Trump is not below using a weapon in settling international trade disputes. Therefore, what goods and services are targeted and how severely can become a political question as much as an economic one. One common reason to enact tariffs is to promote infant industries that may not otherwise be able to compete directly with more developed foreign industry. This theory was extremely important in the early days of the U.S., when high tariffs were used to shield early American industries like textiles and manufacturing. Tariffs have also been used to protect industries related to national security. This is why countries often protect their domestic defense and aerospace industry with tariffs on foreign manufacturers, among other policies. National security is also the justification given by the Trump administration for enacting steep tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, despite protests from the defense industry. In the context of a trade war, retaliation is also a major factor. For example, in 2018, the Trump administration enacted tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods from China, which the administration accused of unfair trade practices. After Donald Trump raised tariffs on European steel and aluminum, the EU responded with its own retaliated tariffs targeting American bourbon, motorcycles, and orange juice, among other goods. These retaliatory tariffs were chosen specifically to impact the states of U.S. political leaders who supported the Trump administrated trade policy. So, the jury's still out. And if you want to learn more, tune in next week and we'll see what prices are going up on the United States when President Trump takes office in January. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's program. You can listen to this all over again by going to our website, PassionWorldTalkRadioNetwork.com. Scroll down until you get State of Current Affairs. Click on it. Go to the page. Go below the form if you don't want to leave a comment. Click on the Google link and it'll take you right into the belly of the beast, youtube.com/@PassionateWorldRadio. And you can see this among any other videos we have for our podcast. This show is sponsored by a publishing company in Singapore that will help you write your memoirs. Contact us, pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. The obstacles of podcast training. You can find that on education.passionateworldtalkradio.com/masterclass. 2 months, 5 days a week, 45 minutes, interactive. Check us out. 2 for the price of 1. And also MyFlex. And you need to start using artificial intelligence, because if you don't use it today, you'll definitely be left behind tomorrow. Go over to http://AI-with-Lillian.com. And your call to action is go to our website, PassionateWorldTalkRadio.com/donations. And please donate $5 to our station. Don't forget the 3% from PayPal plus 29 cents for handling fee. So you can always hear the truth, nothing but the truth. So help you to a good slice of the truth. Thank you very much for listening and have a great weekend.